My first guest tonight is the Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who's come out fighting against President Trump's extraordinary threat of 50% tariffs unless. He's due to address his own nation tonight, and he's given us an exclusive interview while weighing his response to this unprecedented threat from the US. What's more, Trump's tariffs are mostly slapped on nations that have a trade surplus with the US, but Brazil has a trade deficit. So why? Well, Trump says, because I can. But he's also settling scores for Jair Bolsonaro, who was Brazil's president during Trump 1.0 and who's facing trial for allegedly attempting to stage a coup against the current president Lula, trying to overturn his 2022 election.
What they're doing to their former president is disgraceful. I know the former president. He fought like hell for the people of Brazil, that I can tell you. And I believe he's an honest man. I think what they're doing to him is terrible.
Bolsonaro, in turn, says he's, quote, passionate about Trump.
I have deep gratitude for him. We had an excellent relationship. We talked about a lot of things around the world. We made plans. It seems we were even dating, with a lot of plans for Brazil. He treated me like a brother. He treats me like a brother. And he put my name in the first line of that letter, right there, my name.
Amid this bromance, the current Brazilian President Lula says it's unacceptable for the USA or any foreign government to interfere in its internal affairs and judicial process. But when he joined me from Brasilia, he also said the best way to discuss any trade issues is around the negotiating table. Mr. President, welcome back to our program.
It's my pleasure, Christian. A great pleasure to talk to you again and direct myself to the American people.
Well, that's a good thing, because I want to ask you first, what does it feel like to be slapped with a 50% tariff by the United States, the world's biggest economy?
Well, Christian, for me, it was a surprise, not only the value of that tariff, but also how it was announced, the way it was announced. I think we're lacking a little bit of multilateralism on President Trump's mindset, and he knows that a problem of this sort, it is solved in a bargaining table, around the bargaining table. So what do we see? We were negotiating with the U.S. already for some months. My foreign affairs minister, the vice president of the Republic, which is also the Minister for Industry and Development and Commerce, were negotiating. And since March, we've sent a proposal to the U.S. government. After 10 meetings, we sent a proposal on May the 16th, saying what we wanted and what was a possible for us to reach an agreement. For our surprise, instead of a response to the letter that we sent, we received the news published in the President Trump's site. It was not a letter sent officially by diplomatic means. I think it was a mistake, a big mistake, because the letter that President Trump is full of things that are not true. First of all, the justice system in Brazil is independent. The President of the Republic cannot interfere in the judicial branch of power. Second is that the trade deficit that is not true. The United States in the last 15 has a surplus of $410 billion vis-a-vis Brazil. And thirdly, if we're going to charge big tax in Brazil, that's a problem of the Brazilian government. If we charge a high tax and they don't agree, we can establish a negotiation with the government. This is how the world works with multilateralism. That's how the world trade works and how Brazil acts. What we cannot have is a President Trump forgetting that he was elected to govern the U.S. He was elected not to be the emperor of the world. It would be much better to establish a negotiation first and then to reach the possible agreement, because we're two countries that we had very good meetings and we have good relations for 200 years. And so he's breaking away from any protocol, any liturgy that should exist between the relations between two heads of state. It was very unpleasant. We're trying to talk with the people there, but we're also preparing ourselves to give an answer to that. What I've been saying publicly is that we will use all the words that exist in the dictionary in trying to negotiate. If we don't manage to reach an agreement, I can reassure you that we will go to the World Trade Organization, or We can gather a group of countries to respond, or we can use the reciprocity law that was passed, this bill by the National Congress. This is how it's going to work. I regret that two countries that have an historical relationship of 201 years prefer to be fighting through judicial means because one president is not respecting the sovereignty of the other president.
Now, Mr. President, apparently President Trump is saying that he, disagrees with Brazil's investigation and court case against your predecessor, President Bolsonaro. This is what President Trump said. This is nothing more or less than an attack on a political opponent, something I know much about. It happened to me 10 times. What's your response to that?
Well, my answer to that is that the judiciary branch of power in Brazil is independent. The president of the republic has no influence whatsoever with the Supreme Court and the justices. The justices are approved by the Senate. They took office and they have independence and they take care of our Constitution. Bolsonaro is on trial, not because he's an opponent, a political opposition. I won 3 elections in this country. It's important to remember that every election that I won, I lost 3 previous elections and won another. So we participated in 5 elections, and never before in this country someone would raise this issue to try to say or try to coup d'etat attempt like Bolsonaro did. No, he's not judged personally. He is being judged by the acts. He tried to organize a coup d'etat. He threatened secretly the death. He planned the death of Vice President, myself, and the Chief Justice. He could be on trial just for that. And the Attorney General denounced yesterday he will be convicted, and I believe in that. Christian, I'd like to say something to the American people. If Trump was Brazilian, and if he did what was happening at the Capitol Hill, he'd also be on trial in Brazil, and possibly and he would have violated the Constitution. According to the justices, he could also be arrested if he had done that here in Brazil.
Well, I have to say at this point, because I have to say that President Bolsonaro denies all these charges. But more to the point, his son, Eduardo, who is I believe, a member of your parliament, he has been in the United States lobbying for sanctions, but he was calling for sanctions against the Supreme Court justice. Then Trump turns around, having thought about it, and in fact puts sanctions on your whole country of 200 million people in terms of this 50% tariff. Your opponents have been, Bolsonaro has been trying to get this result, and they want you to drop the charges.
Well, first of all, it's not the President Lula that is charging Bolsonaro. It's the prosecutor's office, and the Supreme Court is the one that will rule. It's important to remember, Christian, that I was put on trial with this same court, this same Supreme Court, that I lost 3 previous elections in this country, and I never raised any issue. I prepared myself for the next election if I lost one. He knew that he was going to lose the election. When I was in jail, the polls said that I would win the future election. Now he's saying that he was stealed, and then he tried on a coup d'etat, and then as a coward, he fled to the U.S. before my inauguration without handing over power. So this is a country that deserves respect, and President Trump has to respect the sovereignty of this country, the sovereignty of the Supreme Court, the sovereignty of the legislative body of power, the executive branch of power, as I respect U.S. sovereignty. It's important to remember that the super tariff will also create problems for the American consumer, for the American people, not only for the Brazilians. I'm going to try to solve the problems here in Brazil. We're talking with the business sectors, with the agricultural producers, with the fishermen, with the trade unions. We're going to find a solution, and we will give a response. Not by sight. We'll send an official letter through diplomatic letters from the President of the Republic of Brazil to President Trump to know that respect is something very good, and I like to show respect, and I like to receive respect.
As you know, President Trump has threatened big tariffs at 50% at one point on China, then they walked that back. 50% on one point on Colombia, and Colombia then agreed to Trump's demands on deportees. People and countries do not want to provoke President Trump because they think that it will be even worse for themselves and their economies. What is your economic plan B if you don't agree to what President Trump is demanding, and if you get hit with the 50%? Who's your market? How do you survive?
Oh, Cristiane, primeiro, se eu
Well, Christian, well, first of all, if I respond to what is my strategy, no, it's not going to work. So I can't tell you my strategy. What we're discussing, I just wanted to tell you something, Christian. In 2.5 years of my term, I created 379 new markets for Brazilian goods and service. I've been traveling a lot abroad, and we'll reach an agreement with the European Union. We'll have an agreement with the countries from Asia and an agreement with the Latin American country. We'll talk with Mexico, and we're going to try to seek for new trade partners. But we will still take into account the importance that the U.S. has for us. I would never imagine to pick up a fight with the U.S. Never. You know very well I had an extraordinary relationship with all the former presidents since Clinton to Bush, Obama, and to Biden. And I hope to have a good relation with President Trump, too. Now, what is important to take into account is that it's necessary to respect the sovereignty of each country. We have to respect what is happening inside a country. To talk about deforestation in Brazil, Brazil is the country that takes more seriously the climate change issue. We have diminished 50% of deforestation in the Amazon tropical forest, and my commitment till 2030 is to have zero deforestation in the Amazon. And I hope that President Trump will come to COP30 because it's going to be in the heart of the Amazon. And so he will come to get the rainforest of the Amazon. And first of all, we're going to find out if the leaders are talking seriously, if they're really concerned when they come to COP30. I want to see if the world leadership is understanding that the scientists are right when they say, or they'll think that it's just a lie and that's not happening. This is what we have to find out at COP30, because the rich countries promised in Copenhagen in 2009 to create a 100 billion fund per year to help the developing countries, the poor countries, and up till now, nothing came out from that fund. Now it's already $1.3 trillion, this fund, if it was updated. So, Cristiane, what I believe is that my political life I was born as a negotiator. I was a trade union leader. I went on strikes. I had many workers' assembly, but everything ended at a bargaining table. It's at the bargaining table that we solve the issues, and it's at the bargaining table. It's much more cheaper than going to war. It's much more cheaper to have confrontation. You don't destroy anything under a negotiation, but we won't have any death tolls. No one dies under a negotiation table. This country that is talking to you is a peaceful country. We have no litigation whatsoever with any country in the world, and we don't want to have litigation with any country. We want to solve the problem around a negotiation table. That's why we sent on May the 16th the proposals for the U.S. government.
You talk and you remind us all that you were a negotiator. So is President Trump. He likes to call himself a great deal maker. Surely that means the two presidents, you and he, should have room to be able to sort this out. But, you are left-wing progressive, he is right-wing, and all of that. Maybe your politics just don't match, but there's something that's going on between you all. You have said that Brazil's trade with the US represents 1.7% of your total GDP. It's not like we cannot survive without the United States. That's what you told Brazilian television this week. Do you think that your country and maybe others like the BRICS and other countries are going to be able to Trump-proof, in other words, to set up a separate market or whatever it is to protect against these kinds of unilateral tariffs from the United States?
Cristiano, deixa eu te dizer.
Well, Christian, let me say to you something very bluntly. I'm not a progressive president. I am the president of Brazil. I don't see President Trump as a far-right president. I see him as the president of the U.S. He was elected by the American people. So it doesn't matter if I like him or not. I like him in terms of his ideology. What matters is that he's the president of the U.S. and I'm president of Brazil. And it's me and him. And so the best thing in the world is for us to sit around a table and talk. That would be the best thing in the world. But now he has demonstrated that he's not interested because he thinks he can do whatever he wants with the tariffs. The second issue is that no one who wants to break away from the U.S., no one wants to be free of the U.S. What we want is not to be a hostage of the U.S. We want freedom. We don't want to be a hostage of the U.S. We want freedom for the trade. And so it's important to remember that we represent 40% of the international trade in the world. And it's important to remember that we have 25% of the world GDP. And besides that, we have almost half of the world's population. And so we don't want to pick up a fight with anybody. The BRICS was not created to fight with any country. The BRICS was created so that we that consider ourselves equally discuss in a peaceful manner our issues. This is how we seek peace in Ukraine. That's how we sought peace in Gaza. That's how we want peace in the African continent, especially in Congo. Brazil does not want to feed any war or participate in war. Brazil wants peace and negotiate. It's important that the U.S. government should know that.
Okay, so I want to ask you whether you might feel any sympathy or have any advice for President Trump when it comes to President Putin. You've just talked about wanting peace in Ukraine, and you spoke to President Putin when you went to commemorate the end of World War II in Moscow just this year. You have suggested that you could mediate, but you've also seen that President Trump tried to talk sense to Putin, tried to look like, you know, a negotiator and a mediator, and Putin has absolutely failed to respond. In fact, done the exact opposite, and Trump is getting very frustrated. You haven't had any success with Putin either in terms of ending this war. What advice do you have now to President Trump and to yourself and to anybody else who wants to try to end this bloody war?
I was very happy when President Trump said that he was going to negotiate with this war, the end of the war with Putin. I was happy with that. Although I have divergence with Trump, I was happy that President Trump was willing to stop the war. Now, this week, I heard that he's going to sell more arms. The world is very strange, Christian. The world has increased. The NATO countries increased in 5% of their GDP military spending to buy arms. And we have 733 million people that are dying of hunger. And others that don't have medical assistance, other millions don't have drinking water, and don't have basic sanitation. So all this money that is being carried to buy weapons should be carried to end poverty, extreme poverty in the world. And when the extreme poverty countries develop themselves, they can buy from the rich country. But not even this idea they can understand. So I believe that it would be important to understand there are no interlocutor to solve the peace issue. It's necessary that UN should take over the coordination. UN has to take the coordination, and Putin and Zelensky agree with that, to have a coordination of a group of countries that are friends that could develop an alternative proposal to what they want. Otherwise, this war will not have an end. And I hope sincerely that President Trump, instead of selling more weapons, he be more careful to try to reach peace. He has the strength, the force to do that. The same thing, I think, President Xi Jinping. He can be more active and more influential with Putin. So if you don't have interlocutors, the war will continue. It's like Gaza. What's going on in Gaza? Netanyahu doesn't show any respect for anybody. He doesn't respect the UN, the US. He doesn't respect anybody, anything. Netanyahu is now predestined to continue in government, and to continue in government, he needs to go to war. He has to kill a lot of children. This is the world that we want. Is this the world we want? The US is part of the UN Security Council. China is part of the UN Security Council. Russia is part of the UN of the Security Council. France and England. Where are they now? What are they doing? What is the UN Security Council doing now? And the full members of the UN Security Council, what are they doing? They don't solve anything. Who are they listening to? Who are they talking? Every day I read the newspaper. Someone asks for ceasefire, and the next day Netanyahu kills more women and children there. And now he's just killed children that were trying to seeking for food and not for weapons. Where is the world governance that has to intervene? We need a world governance that should be done by the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. All these 5 countries, they have weapons, nuclear weapons, and all of them are involved in wars. And the US invaded Iraq without consulting the UN. France and England invaded Libya without consulting the UN, and Putin invaded Ukraine without consulting the UN. And the Gaza war, there's no consultation with the UN either. So, Christiane, we're lacking world governance. We're lacking global governance. I think that the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council should gather and say, we have to change the UN Security Council because we're not having the competence to solve the issues. Let's have another governance. And then we have to have representation from Latin America, from Asia, from the Middle East, and Germany, Japan has to join the UN Security Council. Let's change. Let's change to see if we can establish at least hope that the world will have more peace than war.
I understand. We want more peace. There's no doubt about it. So I want to ask you finally, what are you going to tell your people when you speak to them in a national address about the current crisis? It's been described as the worst crisis between the United States and Brazil in more than a decade. What are you going to say to your people?
Olha, eu ainda não vejo crise, Cristiano.
I don't see a crisis yet. Sincerely, I think that in negotiation, that's how it works. Each one says what they want, and each one listens what they have to listen. But what is important is that the relationship between the two countries cannot go on like this. I don't consider myself an emperor to make a decision and publish on the newspaper. That's not how it works. That's impossible. And now President Trump to write a letter and putting as a condition, a precondition for negotiation, no. And that's very discretionary. I can't even believe in that. When I read the letter, I thought it was fake news when I saw the letter through the media. And then I thought it was a true letter that was signed by President Trump. So I can reassure you that Brazil, in the right moment, will give the right answer to the President Trump's letter. And in my address to the Brazilian people, I'm going to tell the Brazilian people what I'm thinking about all this. And sincerely, I can reassure you that Brazil does not enjoy troublemakers and trouble. Brazil likes to negotiate and peace. And that's how I act, and I think that's how all presidents should act. And this is, I think about President Trump too. That Brazil is an historic ally of the U.S. Brazil praises the economic relations that Brazil has with the U.S., but Brazil will not accept anything imposed on it. On the country. We accept negotiation and not imposition.
President Luiz Inácio da Silva of Brazil, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Obrigado a você, Cristiano.
Well, thank you, Christiane. And I hope, sincerely, I hope, Christiane, that President Trump make a review and revise his opinion.